Hey everybody, welcome back here to campus at Trade Show University. This is going to be a fun episode because we're really touching on a topic that we have never talked about before, and that is show production. So, all you show producers, show planners, show organizers, this one is for you. But even if you're an exhibitor or somewhere else on the trade show scale, you're going to find great value out of this. And I know you're going to be entertained as well today. My guest is Marc Collins. Marc is the co-founder and executive producer of Odyssey Creative. He began his theater and film career around age 6, and ever since then, he's been bringing content to stages and screens for live audiences around the country and around the world. As a corporate and association show director, he believes in the use of theater production practices to craft the show strategically around the audience experience, and that is so important. Marc, welcome to Trade Show University.
Hey, Jim, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today. And like I said, we're talking about production, and I know I've got the right guy on because that is your world, show production. We were talking before we hit record. We were talking about a big event you've got coming up at where you're going to be there for 10 days, and obviously it's not a 10-day show, but there for 10 days. So some of these are huge, huge commitments for you and your team, and maybe we could touch a little bit on some of that as we go.
For
But
sure.
let's start by talking about a little bit about your background and how did you get into production? Obviously, we talked a little about theater, but just give us kind of what happened back then to lead you into this career.
Well, yeah, I was a theater kid for sure, and just kind of fascinated by the idea of stories and storytelling. I also loved movies as a kid, and I always thought my career would go somewhere like that, somewhere between theater and film. I studied theater. I started working in theater after college, and then I kind of stumbled into this world of corporate events because I was working as carpenter in theater carpenter, and got recruited by this company that does corporate events to build scenery for them. And my boss at the time says, you seem like you might have more to offer. We should get you out into these shows. And I started going out on shows and looking around and saying, gosh, I think I can apply my skills from theater to this environment on what feels like a larger scale. And I was absolutely hooked. And that was in the late 90s. And I started my business in 2001
Okay.
to produce corporate and association events and provide pre-produced video content. So I kind of get the theater and the film, putting stuff on stage and putting stuff on screens for a live audience, and I just love it.
That's awesome. So over 20 years you've been doing this now, full
22
time.
years, yeah, this year, yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So give people an understanding of what are the kinds of events that you produce.
Well, really my favorite thing to produce are general sessions at corp or at association conferences, big
Okay.
annual meetings for professional associations. You've got the biggest sample set of the attendee base in one room facing one direction, listening to what you have to tell them. You have such an amazing opportunity, to deliver your message. Everything else, the networking is so important. The education is so important. The expo floor is so critical. That's what brings everybody together. But in terms of message delivery, you can't really do that in the breakout sessions. And, you can do it in the brochures, but how many people are reading? And where are you really going to get everybody's attention? And it's the general session. So I preach that to our association clients. This is the way to get that message in front of the biggest group at once as possible.
Wow. Okay. So how much coaching do you do with your clients and for those listening who are on the client side and they're the association, they're the show producer, what should they be considering? What should they be thinking? What do you kind of take people through how you take your clients?
Okay. Well, there are a couple of ways to kind of look at that. One, I think a lot of meeting planners, show planners, and even like event department staff at associations and corporations tend to look at the general session as just like some boxes to check. We have to make sure we do this, this, and this,
Mhm.
and they kind of look at AV as a commodity, gear and labor. Say, okay, these things need to be done. This is the company that has the things. Let's put in an RFP and get the best possible price, and then we'll trust them to do it. We're dealing with transportation and housing and registration and F&B. The AV company can deal with production. But in that case, they're really missing the opportunity to have their story told. So
Mm.
we really advocate for getting involved early. When you start planning these things is the time to start talking to your producer. I work as an executive producer in these settings. Start talking to your producer about strategically what you want to accomplish in this space. What resources do you have to bring to bear? What are the things we're working around in terms of schedule? If you get us into the conversation early, we can start crafting the way that that's going to be delivered. Everything needs to work. In an event, it's a complex clockwork of schedule and location and availability. When people are moving from the expo floor to the next thing, you don't want to be crowding them on this. You want to give them time to get into the room and get settled. So all those questions are things to be asking at the beginning to set yourself up for success. And then for us, it's really about digging into messaging and story points, figuring out the way the association or the corporation wants to deliver their message, and talking to them about the best way to smoothly execute that.
Yeah, as from an attendee perspective, you want it to be so seamless, right? You want it when nothing goes wrong, nobody notices.
Exactly. And that's what you want. You want it to be so smooth that nobody thinks about the fact that they're watching a show. If you're in the movie theater and the film breaks, you're out of the story. If the
Oh
audio
man.
pops, you're out of the story. We want to keep them in it. So everything that we're doing for smooth execution is so that we can keep people's attention. And attention spans are short. They are shorter and shorter these days. And if we give somebody an excuse to look down at their phone, they're going to take it. So we're looking at our show flow minute by minute of how are we changing things up? Not too many minutes at a time of a talking head. If we're putting them up on screen, are we switching between other content? We break for this and do a little entertainment thing here. Do we have some kind of interesting transition? What do our graphics look like? How can we keep people's attention for 90 minutes? And sometimes, well, that's another thing with clients, they might set up themselves up for like a 3 hour general session, and we always tell them banquet chairs are not rated for 3 hours. you know
But that's usually what we're sitting on, right?
that's what we're sitting on. So yeah, we try to tighten things up. E.B. White says, in the Strunk and White Guide to Writing, vigorous writing is concise. You don't want a lot of fluff in the session. You want to move quickly from point to point, get that thing landed and move to the next thing, keep people's attention and leave them with a message they can remember when they walk out.
So it's really like we said earlier, it's really all about that attendee journey, the attendee flow through this and really keeping them in mind as you're planning. Like you said, if you make your times in between sessions too tight, then all of a sudden people are rushing, they're getting in late, they're missing things, and you want it to flow.
Right. This is all about the attendee experience. And that's something we often have to advocate for with our clients because there's so many competing priorities.
Mm.
In a professional association, for example, the staff works for the board essentially. And the board, often the volunteer leadership, they might have their priorities of what they want to put forward. The staff might have their strategic priorities coming from their executive director of what they want to put forward. But is anybody sitting in those meetings talking about what the attendee is there for? Is anybody advocating for their experience?
Okay.
And so that's often a voice that we try to bring to those early meetings is how are you compelling people to follow the story and want to come back next year? This is a competitive environment. A lot of shows do similar things and people don't have the travel budget to hit multiple shows. So how are you going to stand out? How are you going to be a better experience for that attendee so they'll want to come back to your show?
Yeah, so we're I get excited about this stuff. When you talk about story and stories have a script, right? So are these scripted out? To what degree do you have all this scripted?
I think Steven Spielberg, if he was asked, when you shot Jurassic Park, did you just turn the dinosaurs loose and roll cameras? It is absolutely scripted as carefully and tightly as possible. You want there to be some pockets for spontaneity. You want some surprise and delight moments. You want authenticity with the audience, but that can only happen, ironically enough, in a well-structured environment. Once you've got your lead presenter really well rehearsed and really, really smooth with their remarks, that's when they can go off script. That's when they can have a moment with the audience where they break out of that and have that connection. And that's authentic and that's memorable. But yeah, we have a tightly locked down process. We start with a show flow, which is kind of, some people call it a run of show, an outline minute by minute of everything that needs to go into it. That's kind of the blueprint for the thing that gets all the stakeholders sign off. We are checking all the boxes as originally intended. But then you go into that script to really render it all out. And what are the finishes and how does it feel and how does it look? And then it's not just the presenters that are using that script, it's the crew. There's 20 or 30 of us backstage in front of house following that script, and a show caller on a headset like this one calling those cues, just like in the theater, so that this all happens seamlessly. So yeah, that script is the document that gets everybody onto the same page. We've been working on the event for 6 months or 8 months, and we might walk into the room and the AV crew is looking at it for the first time. If we give them that script, then they know what we're trying to accomplish.
Wow. Yeah, and I know how many times I've sat through a general session, and whether I might be entertained, I might be bored, I might be, whatever emotion that I'm going through and whatever I get out of it, but I have no idea. And until recently, I had no idea how long that was planned, how many people are actually doing things at that moment behind the scenes. It's not just the one person who happens to be giving the talk on stage. There's so much. So give some of the people that are working behind the scenes on a typical general session.
Oh, sure. And to me, as a theater guy, again, it's very gratifying to work with theater people who get the idea of the show in real time and how it all plays out. But if you kind of break down into the technical categories, you've got lighting and you've got sound and you've got video and you've got graphics. There's kind of some of the big buckets. So in lighting, you've got a lighting designer who figured out long since before, when the scenic designer was working, who's not in the room anymore, what the set was going to look like and where the lights could go in the ceiling, and worked with the building to figure out the rigging and all that and get the entire light plot built to get the stage lit and the presenters lit in a way that the video guys can get them on camera and IMAG. Then you've got the sound designer who's doing the same thing with the rig to figure out how to get the best sound all the way around the room, and also what those cues are going to be and what that music is going to be. Sometimes they look to us, the producer, to provide that. Sometimes they've got their libraries, but a lot of clients want that kind of stuff curated. It's a quick sidebar on music. If you have a 30-minute walk-in for a general session, you've got 30 minutes to set the tone for what you're going to do. What's the audience coming from? Where they're going to start. Where you want the energy to be. So curating a playlist that goes up 30 minutes where the beats per minute is increasing steadily will get them from their coffee break in their last education session up to the energy level you want them when program starts, and we're going to cold open with video. So there's the sound, there's the music, there's all that, there's the microphones, there's the rehearsal for all those things. And then there's the video. Video is broken. There's the live stuff that's going on. There's camera operators in the back of the room, and there's video switchers backstage who are cutting between cameras on a separate channel so that they're not bothering the show callers trying to call lights and sound. But there's also pre-produced content, and that's something I mentioned earlier, something that we do a lot of. A compelling, interesting on-stage experience means going back and forth between the stage and the screens. Lights down, video rolls. So you've got a combination of this live experience that's happening in the room and this polished, produced piece that's ready to go, that's fully packaged, that you're going to throw to, that's going to support that messaging. You got a mix of those various things. So you've got video playback going on as well. And then you've got graphics. Graphics are often one of the first things you see when you walk into the room. You've got a big array of screens. Does it look kind of like the website when you register? Does it look a little bit like the brochure you got when you checked in? Does it feel a little bit like your badge, but is it in motion? Are the lower thirds that come up when someone comes onto stage, do they play along with that? Do they sort of tie into what you saw on the sponsor signage in the expo floor? Coordinating all that to the attendee experience makes somebody feel branded. You feel like, okay, I know where I am. I know that this show is part of the bigger picture. And if you silo those various departments, you miss that opportunity. So graphics are something they're working on when your expo provider and your general contractor are working on signage for the trade show floor. Coordinate it all together. And of course, when you walk in the room, it's just a bunch of people sitting behind computers pressing buttons.
But doing way more than that. It's the expertise behind it to know which buttons to press at the right time to make all this just go seamlessly. And for all those,
that's the one position I don't mean to cut in, but
no,
I got to give full credit to the person wearing this headset sitting at the desk, the show caller, or in the in theater parlance, the stage manager. They are the conductor of the orchestra. All of those people back there are experts in their fields. They're experts with their equipment. They know exactly how to execute, but they are relying on the timing coming from the stage manager, show caller, to make all those things happen. So there's a very complex set of cueing codes and presets that are all timed out because those often have to happen in very rapid succession for a bunch of things to happen at once on stage during a transition. And just like you're calling a Broadway show where a lot of different things have to happen, you have to give the flymen their cues, you have to give the lighting cue, you have to give the deckhands cues to move scenery. Those things have to happen really, really fast. Everyone's got to know the language, and the show caller is the one who's making sure all of that goes really beautifully. And as a producer, ideally, I get to sit in the back row and kind of take my headset off my ear a little bit, try to take it in as an attendee, and make notes on that to make it better for next year.
Wow. So the producer, you're doing, your job is pre-planning. Your job is getting everything ready. So when the show starts, you can sit back and watch the magic happen.
Right. You know, I don't want to leave out the rehearsal process because that is so critical, but I'm very heavily involved in rehearsal. My whole team is very heavily involved in rehearsal. But then when we're really in show, the best thing I can do for the quality of the show is not to interrupt anybody on headset. They are doing their jobs. My job at that point is to record the experience mentally, make notes, and take it in as an audience member does.
Well, I really encourage everyone to re-listen to this episode because there's so many little nuances that you can learn from. You know, whether you are planning your own show or maybe you're an exhibitor and you're trying to figure out, how do I create a better experience right there at my booth? You're going to learn some of the things that Marc has been talking about that you can incorporate right there. Or maybe you're going to be planning your own corporate events and you're going to want to take some things away and then next time you're at that general session, you're going to be looking around and you're going to be noticing, okay, the music. Okay, I see what they're doing.
Yeah, those people sitting at the back of the room at that tech table with the black curtains around it, they are the tip of the icebergs. Everybody else is behind the screens, but those are the people who are trying to make sure I have a good show today.
That's just amazing. And I love the fact that you brought up rehearsal, because I think that is we don't give that enough credit. We don't
absolutely.
give enough credit.
I mean, as a theater guy, it is all about rehearsal.
Yeah, because so again, it's that flawless performance. It's the believability that, and that I'm now in a different place. I'm in a new world. I'm if you're in a theater, if you're at a show, that you are immersed and you're drawn in to the messaging, the branding, the talk, all of that, and it doesn't happen.
It's all an illusion. It's you have to make it feel very authentic. It's not natural when you're up there on stage, maybe reading from a presidential style teleprompter or reading from downstage monitors and delivering this message. The coaching that I'm trying to give presenters, it doesn't feel natural the way that you want to. Not, cheat your shoulders to the audience a little bit. Don't turn your hips this way when you're walking. It doesn't feel natural. So you have to work on it. You have to rehearse it. There's this great Bushido quote that you can only fight the way you train. If you don't get some muscle memory, if you don't let your voice feel itself saying the words, let your body feel itself on stage, let your eyes get used to the lighting and reading from the prompter, you can't just think about it and then expect to do it well on stage. So we really rehearse for two reasons. One is for the presenters, and that is critical because these are leaders of major organizations, and we need to give the attendees confidence in the organization. So they need to have confidence in their leadership, and the presenter needs to be smooth in that. If the presenter is nervous, the audience is nervous. If the presenter is comfortable and confident, the same applies. So we really rehearse for the presenters first and foremost so that they can deliver their best possible presentation and really, really connect with the audience on that. But we also rehearse for the crew because the crew needs to know exactly how this is going to play also. And the show caller wants to get the timing of things down. And, getting back to that idea of, does this feel natural to the audience? Are they ever being pulled out of the story? If the music comes up at just the right time and the person's walking off next and the next person's walking on, because they've rehearsed that, they know it's how it's going to go. You never get that moment where suddenly somebody panics and they're like, oh, I don't know what I guess Bob is next. And then Bob comes up and then Bob's thrown off. So we rehearse that. We rehearse all of that. So everybody feels good about it. And then when they walk on stage, they're smiling and they feel great. Now the audience is smiling and they feel great. So rehearsal.
Are there any things that, other than not rehearsing enough, any other things you see that associations or show planners do wrong? That you're like, oh, I see this is a common mistake, and here's a way to fix it. Anything that you could share about that?
Gosh, that's a great question. I think Probably the biggest one is just not thinking about the potential impact of these things enough. It's just missing the opportunity to do things intentionally, to do things strategically. The order that people go on stage, the order in which you do things tells the audience something. Whether you mean to be telling them that or not, you are telling the audience something. If the executive director, the paid staff leadership of an association, is the first person to take the stage and the volunteer leadership follows them, you have told you've told the audience something about the structure of your association. So you better make sure that that's what you mean to be telling them. It's so easy to just have a spreadsheet and say, well, we always do the national anthem. We usually play a video. Then our CEO comes on and does the annual report. And then we usually do accounting. And then we usually play another marketing video. And then we send everybody to dinner. Those are the boxes we need to check. But are they in the right order? This is a story. Is there a beginning and a middle and an end? Are we picking up the audience where they left off the last time they were in this room last year, taking them somewhere else and then dropping them off a place where we can meet them again? Is this part of continuity? So I think that's the biggest thing that I see, is that people just don't think about the opportunity they have in front of them to be really intentional about these things and allow it to just unfold.
Absolutely. It's a production. It is truly
It's a show.
production.
Yeah, that's what I think of it. It's if you've got an audience, it's a show. Don't treat it like a program. Don't treat it like just the live version of the list you printed out of the things you've got to accomplish. Treat it like a show. Treat your presenters like characters. That's what part of the story are they telling?
Yeah, like you said, you have the boxes there. Now, how do we amaze our
those
audience? Yeah. Rearrange them. How do we get from box A to box B in a way that no one's expecting, and it's going to just create a wow moment for them, or keep them engaged? Because usually we see the energy go down from the speaker to the next speaker, because we're waiting, because it's silence, and then the next speaker's walking on, and
silence is death.
It is. Oh, it's the worst.
It's so awkward, and you want to fill those spaces, just like in radio. You don't want any air in the conversation. You want those things to flow naturally together, and then people stay in it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Such great stuff here. Before we wrap up, are there any tips, anything that you see the best associations that you work with that they do right?
Sure. Two things spring to mind. One, start thinking about this early and get creative professionals involved early who can ask you the right questions. You are an expert in your field. We are experts in ours. Let us help you starting early on. Probably the biggest one of anything else is put yourself in the seat, put yourself in that banquet chair mentally for this experience. Think about the attendee experience, not only the duration of it, but what information are you giving them? What's the order of that stuff? What are you asking them to remember when they come out of there? How do you want them to feel? And if you put yourself mentally in that position and you say, gosh, this is an awful lot of talking heads, that's what they're going to be feeling too. So give them some credit. They're not just there because they have to be. They're there because they're choosing to be, especially in professional associations where everything is so mission driven. You're not there because you're an employee. You're there because you believe in your industry and you want to make it better. So reward their investment with valuable content, respect their time, entertain, surprise, and delight them. And they'll walk out of the room singing your tune, and they will come back.
I love those words, reward their investment, because they're not, you're not just giving another talk. You're not just giving an update. They are investing to be there in front of you. And for anyone who is thinking, well, I don't do big shows like this. I don't do big general sessions and things like that. I have smaller breakouts and stuff like that. Still go through the same process, rehearse, plan, do everything that Marc has been talking about. It's just, you may not have a whole team of people behind you. It might just be you, but you could still take yourself and your team through that process.
And Jim, it just one passing note on that is the thing you can do, no matter what the size of your show is, even if the show is just people walking by your booth, put yourself in the audience's position and think through what that experience is. What kind of day are they having by the time they get to your booth, what have they experienced so far? What would you want to do when you walk up to a booth? Would you want to be accosted and sold to? Do you want to be engaged and comforted? Do you want opportunities to discover the things that are important to you that you know as a professional are in your booth? But how do you get out of the way of the sales mode and engage them as people, because they're a person and you're a person? Think
Yeah.
about that attendee experience, and I guarantee you can improve it.
Just awesome. This has been this has been so fun, and the time has just absolutely flown by. So, Mark, as we wrap up here, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about Odyssey Creative and who is it that you serve?
Oh, who do you serve? We serve meeting planners. We serve association conference um, teams, departments, and truly we serve the audience. That's we have to be brought on to work on the show in order to do so, but we do like to think of the audience as kind of a phantom client. But yeah, I mentioned association work. I love it so much because it is mission driven, and also that there's not as much turnover a lot of the time in association staffs, and there's not as much turnover in the membership and in the attendee base. So you can create a more consistent experience. But yeah, associations are some of our favorite clients because we can tell bigger stories over more years and be talking to a lot of the same people. Um, Odyssey Creative, we're kind of all over. We work nationally, internationally when necessary, but most of the time we're right here in the. I'm in New York City, greatest city in the world for anybody who's tracking. Um, but we work wherever the show is. We go to the client's offices to rehearse and plan and write scripts, and then we go to the venues for site visits and rehearsals, and then shows. But it's something that we love to do so much. Any association that's looking to up their game, that's probably my very favorite category of client, is an association that is ready to step up and do a little bit more and be more competitive for their audience's attention and memory. Love getting with them and sitting down with them, learning their language, learning their culture, learning their style and their tone, and then helping them get that in front of their audience.
Awesome. If there's anyone, association or anyone else who just wants to learn more about you and wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to connect?
Odysseycreative.com. And I know that sounds so easy to spell. It's not. Odyssey creative.com. And yeah, we've got numbers there, emails there, samples of other shows. Always happy to brainstorm and talk about ideas to make your show better.
Excellent. I'll drop that right into the show notes so that anyone who's on the treadmill or driving and they they didn't have a chance to write that down, click on the show notes button and then you'll find all the links to connect with Mark. Mark, this has been an absolute delight. I've had just so much fun listening, getting a little peek behind the curtain and seeing that there's more than just those two guys that are sitting at the back of the room. There's a lot more going on. So thank you for sharing
Oh,
that.
it's my pleasure. This is a lot of fun. As you can probably tell, I'm very passionate about it. I enjoy the work immensely, so I love talking about it too.
Excellent. Everyone connect with Mark. If you have any questions about production or reach out to him about using Odyssey Creative and continue to learn, keep getting better, keep producing better numbers and better results. And we'll see you next time here on campus at Trade Show U.